If you have been diagnosed with PCOS, or if you suspect that something's off but haven't been given clear answers, this update matters. So PCOS has officially been redefined as PMOS, and that shift is more than just a name change. For years, women have been told that they need cysts on their ovaries to qualify, when the real issue was often never the ovaries at all, it was metabolic. That is why so many women are stuck with weight that won't budge, irregular cycles, fatigue, acne, and they're told just to eat less and move more. Advice that often makes things far worse when insulin resistance is the real driver. Hi, I'm Kim. I'm an online weight loss coach, and after losing 15 kilos myself and helping others reverse insulin resistance and lose weight sustainably, I became obsessed with understanding the hormonal side of fat loss with no calorie counting or excessive cardio. In this video, I'm going to break down what PMOS means, why this change in the name really matters, and what actually works when the root cause is metabolic dysfunction. And I'll clarify, I'm not a doctor. I'm someone who works with women with PMOS and currently going through the steps for my own diagnosis with a doctor, so this one hits close to home for me. So let's just quickly cover off what has changed. So the old name was PCOS, it is now PMOS. So the old name stood for polycystic ovary syndrome, and the new name is polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome. The name change was driven by a medical consensus group after roughly 14 years of review. So this didn't just happen overnight. The word polycystic implied that the defining feature was cysts on the ovaries, but the problem is that many women who tick all the other boxes for all the symptoms, some of them don't have any cysts at all, and many women with ovarian cysts don't have the other diagnostic criteria for the condition, so the name was causing some confusion for both patients and doctors who might have instead identified metabolic markers if the name hadn't pointed them straight to the ovaries. So what the new name reflects, so we've got polyendocrine, which means it involves more than one hormonal endocrine system. So adrenal glands, thyroid, pituitary, pancreas, ovaries. Then we've got metabolic, and finally we're naming the underlying driver, metabolic dysfunction and insulin resistance. Some, like Dr. Ben Bickman, have even been calling this insulin resistance of the ovaries, which had previously been the closest I've seen to a true name for the condition. Then ovarian, the ovaries are still very much involved, and that is important. We have not lost that. It is estimated to affect between 8 to 20% of women worldwide, and it is the single most common endocrine disorder of reproductive age. And it doesn't just disappear with menopause either. The underlying metabolic dysfunction can continue. And a quick note, you may still see PCOS used everywhere in research databases, advocacy organizations, and by doctors who haven't quite caught up yet. That's fine. The legacy name isn't going anywhere fast. It takes a long time for these changes, and both the terms are still going to be used together during the transition period. Now, here is where I want to make a point, because a name change is only useful if the diagnostic criteria gets updated to match it. So the current diagnosis is still largely based on what's called the Rotterdam criteria. You need two of the following three. You need irregular or absent menstrual cycles, signs of elevated androgens, either on a blood test or elevated testosterone, or physical symptoms like acne, excess hair growth, or thinning on the scalp, and then polycystic appearing ovaries on an ultrasound. My concern is that if doctors are still using that third point as a primary indicator, women without visible cysts can still fall through the cracks. This was one thing that came up when I was talking to my doctor. I said, I've basically been on the pill since I was a teenager, and that just means I've only gone through couple years worth of cycles. Would I have cysts? Which means that I could slip through the cracks if they scan and they don't see anything, despite me having every other marker, including long-standing issues with insulin. And some women who don't want to have or can't get an internal ultrasound, which is very invasive, could still struggle to get diagnosed. So what's missing from the mainstream diagnosis is metabolic screening. Fasting insulin levels, not just fasting glucose, full lipid panel, cholesterol, including LDL, HDL, and triglycerides, not just the one overall cholesterol marker, HOMA-IR testing, which is homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance, which is a score that just estimates how effectively your body processes insulin. It's important to test these and other areas by the age of 40 because women with this condition have 7 times the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Yet, metabolic screening isn't always standard in a diagnosis for PCOS or PMOS. The new name is a step in the right direction, but the diagnosis really needs to catch up, and women need to advocate for a full metabolic screening, not just a pelvic ultrasound and some basic blood work. And the 4 types do still matter, and I've done a full video on the 4 types of PCOS or PMOS. The link is in the description, and I'll just chuck it up here. But go and watch that because I just talk about the four different types. So this is insulin resistant, inflammatory, post pill, and adrenal. But today we're focusing specifically on the insulin resistant type because it affects approximately 70 to 80% of women who have this condition. And it's the type where metabolic intervention makes the most meaningful difference. If you've watched my other video on PMOS, all of the information there is still completely relevant and worth watching because I took a metabolic approach to that video. I even dive into how to lose weight with PMOS, which I won't be able to talk about in this video since I'm just talking about the big changes that are happening in medicine. So as I've already sort of alluded to, let's just talk about the root cause of insulin-resistant PMOS. Now, this is the part of the name that PCOS never really gave away, and why mentioning metabolic in the new name is really important. Here's what is actually happening in the body. Bear with me while I get a little bit sciencey here. So the pituitary gland produces 2 hormones that tell the ovaries what to do. We've got LH, which is luteinizing hormone, and FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone. In women with PCOS, this ratio is off. Sorry, PMOS. Typically, you've got high LH and low FSH, and a high LH drives testosterone production in the ovaries, and FSH is what would normally convert that testosterone into estradiol. But without enough FSH, testosterone builds up, not enough estradiol gets made, and if you have low estradiol, you have got metabolic chaos. Estradiol is sometimes referred to as the master regulator of metabolic health in women. Without enough of it, the body struggles to burn both glucose and fat efficiently. And if you have got too much testosterone, you can start to notice things like acne, hair where you don't want it, and hair loss where you do want it, irregular cycles, and difficulty with fertility. Now enter insulin resistance, where high insulin tells the ovaries to produce more androgens, which is more testosterone, which compounds the whole problem. This is a loop that we're starting to build. We've got insulin resistance leading to more androgens, leading to less estradiol, more metabolic dysfunction, more insulin resistance. Like I said before, Dr. Ben Bickman refers to this as insulin resistance of the ovaries. It is one of the descriptions that once you hear it, it really helps to sort of reframe how you think about it. And unfortunately, the gut microbiome is also disrupted in women with this condition, leading to increased inflammation, leaky gut, and further insulin resistance. It is a whole body issue, not just an ovarian one, and I hope I'm making that clear. We've also got higher rates of Hashimoto's thyroiditis and autoimmune thyroid conditions. So if your thyroid is also struggling, that needs to be addressed alongside insulin resistance. Now, let's talk about what actually helps a bit. Now, I did dive way further into this in my other video, but diet. The goal here is to lower that circulating insulin because, like I said, that feeds into that cycle, not just blood glucose, I mean insulin. So this means removing refined carbs, sugars, seed oils, prioritizing fatty proteins, healthy fats, non-starchy vegetables at every meal, then natural carbs, berries, sweet potato, and lower glycemic fruits, and some supplements like berberine and inositol and magnesium. They've all been shown to drastically help with both PMOS and insulin resistance. I adapt these protocols for each client individually. I genuinely just can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer here on YouTube because some women are managing Hashimoto's alongside PMOS, and some are post-pill trying to regulate their period again, and some are in perimenopause. The approach really shifts depending on what is actually going on for you, but that's what personalization is for, and that's what I do with my coaching. Another thing I want to talk about is sleep. Sleep deprivation directly worsens insulin resistance. I've talked about sleep in so many of my videos, but even 1 or 2 nights of poor sleep can measurably spike fasting insulin the following day. And like I said, we want to be keeping insulin low. And unfortunately, food is not the only thing that raises insulin. So cortisol will rise with poor sleep, and then cortisol will drive more blood sugar, more insulin, more androgen production, more PMOS symptoms. Similar thing is going to happen with stress. So chronically elevated cortisol is one of the main drivers. Keeping insulin elevated when diet is clean. High cortisol, elevated blood sugar leading to elevated insulin, which is just creating more androgen stimulation in the ovaries. Then we've got movement, which can kind of counteract these things. So resistance training is really non-negotiable for me. Muscle tissue is responsible for absorbing 80% of post-meal glucose. So the more muscle you have, the better your insulin sensitivity is. 2 to 3 resistance sessions per week keeps this consistent and keeps stress hormones low. And probably one of the only benefits to having PMOS is that higher testosterone level, which can really help in the gym, and you can build muscle a lot quicker. So here's my take on the name change. Is PMOS perfect? No, but no medical condition name really is. But does shifting focus from the cyst to metabolic dysfunction and endocrine disruption move us in a better direction? Yes, absolutely. Because for years, women have been told that their issue is their ovaries, or they just need to lose weight and everything will fix itself. Meanwhile, no one is actually looking at what is actually driving it, which is insulin, hormones, and the metabolic loop that is happening underneath it all. PMOS won't fix that overnight, but if it gets more women asking better questions and more doctors running proper metabolic testing, that is a massive step in the right direction. And if you haven't seen it yet, my video on why you can't lose weight with PCOS, now PMOS, including an overview of the 4 types of PMOS, is linked next. And I will have to get used to saying PMOS, so bear with me. But if you want to go deeper as well, my free masterclass is linked below. I cover the 5 insulin mistakes you're probably making right now and how to fix them, which is honestly perfect considering the key driver of PMOS is insulin resistance. And that is exactly what my coaching revolves around. And I recently just redid this masterclass. So even if you've watched it before, it's worth rewatching. And a quick note, everything here is for educational purposes only. I'm not a personal medical doctor. Please go chat to your doctor, talk about the new name, and see what they think. And I'll see you in the next one.